The ANC has won 62% of the vote, and President-elect Nelson Mandela has lost no time in holding talks with outgoing President de Klerk to set up the new National Unity Government.
Madiba magic is in the air. South Africa is high on the euphoria of liberation. However, the wealth of the country is concentrated in the hands of the minority. Faced with a massive economic problem, black people had political freedom, but white people still controlled most of the economy.
The government concurs with the views of the Black Economic Empowerment Council report that it is now necessary to make our policies on black economic empowerment more explicit.
So, the government introduced BEE, which would later become BBBEE, to increase black ownership, create black managers and executives, support black-owned businesses, transfer skills and wealth. In theory, BBBEE was about justice, redress, and economic inclusion. Businesses are graded on ownership, management control, skills development, enterprise development, and supplier development. Companies don't need to transform the economy, they just need to score points. So BBBEE becomes a game of how do we score points without losing control. And that's where banks, consultants, and big white-owned firms found their advantage. For example, MTN created a special vehicle called MTN Zakhele in 2010 to sell shares only to black South Africans. The shares were initially sold for 20 Rand per share. This scheme was worth 8 to 9 billion Rand at the time. This special purpose vehicle held approximately 4% equity in the MTN group. On paper, millions of black South Africans became shareholders. MTN improved its BBBEE ownership score. Government praised the deal. But in practice, shares were locked in for years. People couldn't freely trade them. Dividends were limited. Real control stayed with the MTN group. Banks financed parts of the structure and earned interest and fees.
The investigation was initiated in 2017. It says the scheme restricted and placed limitations on black shareholders, and that MTN Zakhele 40 was at odds with the requirements for ownership in the codes of good practice.
We as MTN Zakhele are a totally different legal structure. We cannot control what is happening there. However, we know we are affected.
Holders had placed the initial 20 Rand purchase price into a regular bank account. Those shares would have each been worth 50 Rand, assuming they were invested at lending rate of 10% on a compounded basis. Instead, they lost 90% with the stock sliding down to about. In 2025, MTN announced they planned to delist MTN Zakhele and pay out investors. What are your thoughts on the contribution of BEE? Has it been a net positive, net negative? Sasol Inzalo. Sasol created an empowerment scheme called Inzalo for black investors and communities. The 34 billion Rand empowerment scheme was launched in 2008 to hold 10% of Sasol's shares. The scheme was tied to the share price of Sasol. Based on the share price growth, shares could be sold and pay off the 900 billion debt used to fund the scheme. Meanwhile, consultants were paid, lawyers were paid, banks earned interest, and Sasol kept operational control.
The company's first BBBEE program, Inzalo, failed to pay out to more than 250,000 black South Africans who participated. I think let's start in the beginning with the Inzalo scheme. Why did that fail, do you think?
So the Inzalo scheme was share price dependent, and Sasol's share price is obviously driven by two factors, the oil price and the rand exchange with the dollar. So when that scheme terminated or had the last effective date, the share price was underwater, so nobody could get anything, and Sasol still owed roughly 13 billion to the banks.
Did anybody actually make money out of it?
So out of the scheme, through the period, there were some trickle dividends. So that flowed, and that was good, but from an outcome perspective, no, the shareholders didn't retain value.
For BBBEE deals to happen, you need financing, loans, and complex deal structures. So what do banks do? They finance black ownership deals, charge interest, control deal terms, and hold shares as collateral. Meaning, black partners often don't use their own money, don't control the shares, can't sell them, and carry the risk. While banks earn interest, earn advisory fees, control the structure, empowerment becomes a product they sell. We can't forget fronting. Fronting, an act where a black person or entity is given a stake in a company but does not get the powers associated with it, remains the biggest challenge to the power of BBBEE Act to deliver on transformation.
Is actually a criminal offense. So if something is illegal and something is against the law, we do not want to see that happening. And so we are really concerned about the spread. And you'll see that in our statistics, we've pointed out that last year only we received 243 complaints. And this year we were actually receiving a number of them until COVID happened. And so we're expecting that this will increase. And what is worrying us is the fact that these are new ones. It's not like in the beginning. You know, in 2016, 2017, when we were starting, we were receiving fronting allegations that relating to contracts or arrangements that happened way back, some dating from 2007 and so. But now we've got like recent cases where like people are falsifying their BBBEE certificates to access opportunities in government, and others are just taking black people and using them and using their credentials to access such. And this is illegal.
Commissioner Zodwa-Ntuli said that of the 822 complaints received since 2016, 687, 83%, were related to fronting. The mining, transport, construction, and engineering sectors accounted for most of the fronting complaints. In June 2017, a complaint of BE fronting was laid against JSE-listed Netcare Holdings, which operates the largest private hospital network in South Africa. The complaint was lodged with the broad-based Black Economic Empowerment Commission, which was officially launched towards the end of 2016. The main consequences of fronting are the hindrance to the goal to make Black South Africans the main participants in the local economy and allowing them to participate in the economy and the advancement of the country.
What is the impact of this fronting on those targets? I mean, are we any closer to changing the ownership dynamics?
I suppose that is why we need to be even more worried about fronting. Because what fronting does, it gives you an impression that there is some progress when there is no progress, all right? So what it does is that on the BBBEE certificates of these entities, they will record that they've achieved that 25.1%. But then when you then get into that, you find that there are black people that have just been put there, their credentials, some of them do not know, some know, and there are some that are willing participants who are doing it as a form of business. We must see them in real terms. We must see black people owning the productive assets of this country. We must see management in business, in companies. We must see black people really making decisions, not being tokens on those structures.
The bigger problem here is the financialization of the program, or the act. BBBEE turned transformation into financial deals, balance sheet tricks, shareholding swaps. Instead of building factories, supporting cooperatives, funding township businesses, creating industrial skills, it focused on ownership percentages instead of economic participation. This is why the banks and consultants thrive. They specialize in deals, not development. It doesn't starkly change who owns the land, capital, and industry. After the end of apartheid, employment in South Africa rose significantly, from about 8.9 million employed individuals in 1994 to about 15.1 million in 2024. Black South Africans accounted for the biggest increase, climbing from roughly 63% of total employment in 1994 to about 73% in 2014, according to Statistics South Africa. Empowerment policies such as BBBEE can claim a meaningful victory here. Skilled occupational representation among Black South Africans increased only slightly from 15% in 1994 to 18% by 2014. BBBEE has undeniably facilitated the emergence of a significant black middle class. Despite BE efforts, alarming racial disparities in income and wealth persist. Black South Africans continue to earn significantly less than their white counterparts, even when employed in similar roles. Ownership of economic assets further underscores these inequalities. As of 2022, Non-white ownership on the JSE was only 30%, whereas white South Africans and foreigners held about 70%. What are your thoughts on the contribution of BEE? Has it been a net positive, net negative? Share in the comments down below.